I should have said no. I should have got in between it, but it's my fault. It's your son's dead.
Life is about choices, the moves you make and the ones you don't. As time goes on, all of that stuff starts to add up to who you are, but most don't realize until it's too late. With everything that you've done, it's turned you into who you are. The older Kane's narration at the end of episode 6 reflects on the theme of choices and consequences, how characters' actions define their identity. The choices that these characters have made not only contribute towards who they are, but where they find themselves at this moment in time. Kanan was also telling us that for some, for example in the cases of Famous and Uncle Lou, they may not be fully able to grasp the impact of their decisions until they face the consequences, but by then, it may be too late. So this breakdown will focus on relationships and how some have contributed towards shaping the identity of few of our major players, as well as characters confronting their inner demons and realizing who they truly are, but whether they were right to confess and the consequences that could soon follow. As always, we're also going to be running through a bunch of Easter eggs as well as some parallels to OG Power for all things Raising Kanan Season 3, Episode 6. Now, Episode 6 kicks off with Rock coming home to a big, empty and lonely house, but she's being watched by Panessa. She was here looking for answers because Unique hasn't been home for a week, and that's something I will touch on throughout this breakdown. So he's not come home, she'd been to his tailoring shop but he's nowhere to be found, and considering she just found out he was sleeping with Rock, she came here with a gun in hand, but that's not all.
Post will be dead in a year. Someone lit his ass on fire for telling.
Back in Season 1, Episode 1, we were given some details around what happened to High Post, Rock's ex-boyfriend. It was said that he was banned for being a snitch, but as the series has progressed, we've learned that Rock was a CI for Howard when she was 16. We've also seen her make some moves that have made us question, could she have been behind the downfall of DEFCON, High Post, and maybe even Marvin doing a short stint in prison. Now this is something I broke down in a lot of detail in this video, so I will link this down below, so I would highly recommend going back to it because I did go through a lot of Rock's undercover chess moves, including High Post, so the link will be down below in the description and comment section. Now after Rock turned the tables on Panessa, they sit down and talk. Panessa tells Rock about how the tailoring shop was all fucked up, there's blood everywhere and nobody can find Neek. But the key detail in this conversation was, it's been 1 week since she's heard from Unique, and that's not like him. Now I did say before episode 6, I was firmly in the camp who did believe Unique was dead, based on what we saw in episode 5. The realism compared to the other Power spin-offs, there was also Joey Badass's exit interview and Sasha Penn confirming his death on social media. Kanan's narration also did tell us kings do fall. But this is a big red flag, and we will get to more of it later on with what Detective Howard said and Stefano. But Panessa believes that he is dead. She says that she can feel a piece of her is gone. So her gut feeling is saying Unique is dead. And I think Rock knew it wasn't looking too good either. Now she questioned what did Ronnie have to say about Unique gone missing. Even if he did have love for him or not, Rock said times do change. Which also goes back to the High Post point. Rock was said to be madly in love with High Post. But guess what? When you want to be the big dog, you have to take out whoever's in your way. But the message was clear. The danger and threat was still lurking in the shadows. And so Rock had to find out more information. Meanwhile, Panessa had to keep her gun off safety. Now speaking of taking your gun off safety, Lou and Famous were at the back of Cafe Vu in their makeshift studio, getting bullets off their chest. Famous was in the booth spitting rhymes about his crimes, and you can clearly tell, not only was he struggling to come to terms with what he's done in the past, so was Lou. It was also a foreshadow of what was to come later in the episode as well. He told Famous the only way to get the poison out of him is to spit it out on the mic. Although here's where it starts to get a little complex for Famous. He was spitting about what he did to Freddy. He was having night sweats, he was paranoid, and all he could see was death, because he knows he's done some ill shit. He's trying hard not to be consumed by what he did, but he really is struggling. Now sitting opposite him was someone who understood exactly what he was going through, because Lou is someone who has done the same if not worse, and he's going through something very similar. But here's where I do disagree with Lou. He said that if he says that shit out loud, it gets lighter, except it doesn't, it just causes more shit. So like the older Kane's narration warned us, most don't realize until it's too late. Now on the track 411 itself, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually ends up being a hit in the coming episodes. So when and if it does, this could land Famous in some big trouble with law enforcement, because what 411 is in essence, it's a confession, which could see him going from spitting bars to ending up being behind bars. Now what happened with Freddy was just half of Famous's problems. Knowing that Rock put a gun in Kanan's backpack and he didn't do anything or say anything to Kanan has been weighing heavy on his shoulders, so it was about time he came clean. But Famous was really shook telling Kanan, because he just found himself in a bit of a catch-22. If he didn't tell Kanan, then he's betrayed his best friend, who he considers a brother. If he told Kanan, then he's got a problem with Rock. And we know Rock doesn't have any issues taking Kanan's friends out. Just look at what happened with D-Wiz. So Famous was rightly shook up what Rock could do, but she wasn't the only scary one. Kanan was too. He tells him to pack his shit and kicks his brother out of his own crib for what he sees as betrayal. Whether they can patch things up later, I'm not too sure, but we all know it's not going to end well for Famous being back on the streets. Now, knowing that Rock was the one who put a gun in his backpack, this was going to cause even more issues between Kanan and Rock. But what followed was very reminiscent to what we saw in OG Power with Tasha and Tariq, Rock teaching Kanan to lie. Back in OG Power, it was Tariq who was the one who was caught with a gun in his backpack, which he stole from Angela. He then had to speak to a counselor where Tasha told him there are certain things that her and Ghost wanted him not to say. And the same goes in this situation. Mothers teaching their sons to lie is a common theme. So the deeper we actually get into raising Kanan, the more parallels we can actually find between Kanan and Tariq's journey, which actually makes us understand why the older Kanan took such a liking to Tariq. He definitely saw a lot of his young self in a young Tariq. But in regards to Laura's visit, everything seems like it was fine for now. Whether that changes, let's keep our eyes on this one, because Kanan is sleeping at Famous's crib, and just to state the obvious, Kanan and Rock's relationship is only going to continue to deteriorate, but more so because Ronnie now has his hands on Kanan. So what was Ronnie up to following that brutal beating of his younger brother? Now, with Ronnie, we catch up with him at Unique and Panessa's. He's bagging all of his money, his chains, and whatever else he can find that has value, as well as flinging Panessa across the room. She tells him that's Unique stuff, and he's going to be looking for it when he comes back. But we know Ronnie's a man of a few words. He just stares and leaves, which probably tells Panessa everything she needs to know. Ronnie then comes to see Juliana, where he tells her Unique is gone, so now they can get to work. But the key clues in this conversation, which does foreshadow Juliana's eventual fate, is her making a business deal behind Joaquin's back. This is a deal between just the two of them, nobody else. A business deal which I don't think Joaquin would have approved of. So when he does find out, not if, it's only a matter of when. I think he's going to give the green light for Rock to end his cousin's sister for going behind his back, because I'm pretty sure he's sick of her shit. And I think we all know this is a beef that they need to come back round to. Now, why I think this is highly likely is because it also spices up the beef between Rock and Ronnie. Rock would be taking out Ronnie's connect, which would also fuck with his work. And that's the one thing you don't fuck with, his work. But the end for Juliana is definitely near. Now, while Ronnie was getting his work up and running, he also had his eyes on his next move, Kanan. He was lurking in the shadows as Kanan was setting his couriers up, but also watched on as Paul began to cause a few problems. Kanan was paying his couriers way more than Paul was, and this is where we also saw Kanan standing his ground and showing that scary side he mentioned to Famous earlier on. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if later Kanan actually has to get rid of Paul, because he becomes too much of a problem. So that's just a death prediction and one to keep an eye on. But with Ronnie, he notices Kanan is putting in that work, and he's also got his eyes on his system and crew. So he invites him to a party at Olympic Palace, which is something we are going to get to later on. Now, on law enforcement, we had Agent Tanner and Detective Howard in discussion about Unique. Tanner questioned how Unique wasn't relevant to the task force's investigation, and Howard said that he could ask around if Kanan and Unique had anything going on between them, but he's not heard anything like that. Tanner also mentioned that he thought Kanan was a blind alley anyway, which was bad news for Howard and Rock, who have been trying to pin this whole operation on Kanan since episode 1. But Tanner's digging deep, and he's also keeping his cards really close to his chest. He's not letting Howard know about any other suspects or giving him any other further info. Now, this makes Howard approach Captain Baptiste. He tells him that if Ogden was hanging up his badge and moving to Florida, maybe he could take his job. However, I do agree with the captain's response. It's like I said before, be very careful of what you wish for, because getting too close to the task force can drag him into a whole lot of shit. But from Howard's point of view, he wanted to be as close as possible to make sure he, Rock and Kanan were in law enforcement's crosshairs. Now, we also saw Howard meeting Rock later in the episode, where she questioned him and law enforcement's thoughts about Unique. At this moment in time, his case wasn't exactly a high priority at the precinct, which I'm not surprised with, because he was a known drug dealer, but he did give his thoughts. He said Unique was dead. They may not have found his body just yet, but with the blood at the tailoring shop, the violence, and the steel pipe with the bone fragments and hair, Unique was gone for good. But this won't stop the audience from speculating, and look, I honestly can't blame people for thinking otherwise, and I will also leave this here for you guys to make your own judgment.
Probably dead. You know, like I know. Until that body shows up, he ain't dead.
Now, Howard also questioned whether Rock was scared about being next, because there has been a hell of a lot of violence on the streets. But Rock's response was there's a difference between being scared and being aware, which goes back to the older Kanan narration at the beginning. a narration that provided a glimpse into the psychology aspect of those in the street game, which highlighted perceived control, the inevitability of violence and death, and the fear that comes with it. But at this moment in time, Rock shows that she's not fearing anything, but should she? That's the question. I personally think she should. Back in season 1, she told Kanan be scared, because being scared keeps you alert. Now with Jukebox, we pick up with her, Crystal and Aisha performing in front of executives in the music industry. We've got Marvin in the background grooving to the girls' performance, but as soon as they were done, he starts talking about how Duke needs to be out in the front. From Marvin's point of view, he was just trying to be a good father and be in Duke's corner, not realizing that there is a time and a place. It also gives us a reminder, even though that we've seen Marvin evolve from where he was with Duke in season 1, he's definitely still got a lot to learn, but so do the girls. If they wanted to be the best, they had to prove it, and someone needed to take the lead role, but they needed to prove that they deserve it. Who that will be, let's wait and see, but I do think we all know it is going to be out of Crystal and Duke. Now with this mistake from Marvin, he was a bit down, but with Shelly owning Cafe Vu for years, she knows when someone comes in with a heartbreak. In Marvin's case, it was fucking up with Duke, but look, in his defense, he is trying hard to be there for his daughter. He's trying to right some wrongs and he's still learning, which Lou did give him props for, another relationship that has done a complete 180. So Marvin taking his anger management classes seriously and him confronting his inner demons, it really has gone a long way. Now with Duke, we also have to keep this in mind. She received a letter which showed she'd qualified for the military after she completed her tests and medical examinations. So I do wonder where the writers are going with this story, because I think we all know it ain't gonna work out for her when it comes to music. It's just how does it all fall apart? That's the major question. Could Gerald Moore write an article with a voice that throws Duke's singing career down the pan, which leaves her with no option but to join the military? Could she look around at how things are changing with Kanan, Marvin potentially ending up in prison, and could that push her into going down the military route? It's just something to keep an eye on, especially because Marvin did tell Gerald Duke would be a good piece in the entertainment section, so let's see what happens. Now while we're on the topic of Gerald and Marvin, there was also another key moment. A former employee at Lane's approached Marvin and said he saw him and Tony deep in action plenty of times. Now Marvin played it off as if he didn't know him, Tony, or what he was talking about, but did Gerald buy that story? Let's not forget he is a journalist and his job is to dig deeper into stories, so let's not forget actually what went down with Tony in season 2. She was involved in an undercover operation involving Marvin, but at the time he was way too clever and didn't say or do anything that would have gone against him, but he did find out she was a snitch. So later in season 2 when he found Tony, he sent Marco Baselli to carry out the hit and take her off the chessboard, but the hit did also end in Marco's death. So is it such a coincidence that Marvin's face is now on Agent Tanner's desk? I don't think it is, but what's next? Marvin's on the radar for law enforcement, they're going to be digging deeper, so what's Howard's next move? How will he play this going forward? Now earlier in the episode during Kanan and Rock's argument, Kanan mentioned that Lou feels the same way as he does about Rock, so we saw her coming to Cafe Vu. She hears her father's record playing in the background, which puts a rare smile on her face, but someone who wasn't happy was Lou. This is the first time these two have crossed paths in season 3, with Rock looking to apologize and make an amends, but Lou really wasn't having any of it. For the first time he's actually got something of his own, which wasn't bought through blood money or in any way connected to Rock. He also made it pretty clear he wanted nothing to do with his sister, because he's not fooled by her saying she's out the game. It's about who she is, and he's not wrong. Now despite Lou getting this off his chest, Rock did still try and make an amends. She wanted to be there and be a family again, but Lou rightfully refuses because someone like Rock, she's always looking at herself. There's always a hidden agenda. He was also done being Rock's hammer, which is where he comes clean about Scrap and Dee-Wiz's death, still weighing heavy on his shoulders. Now there are two ways we can actually look at this. From Lou's perspective, Rock made a lot of decisions for him when he was younger, so he blames Rock for the way he turned out, and for some of the decisions he made. From Rock's point of view, he had bodies on him that are his and his alone. And just like she said in season 2, it is what it is when it comes to the street game. You have to live with your decisions and move forward, because if you don't, the world that they live in will eat you alive. I also think Rock was right when she said he's a grown man now and he had to take responsibility. But this conversation was the catalyst that sent Lou straight back to the drink. Now later on that night, Kanan invites Duke to this party with him along with Aisha. If he was still boys with Famous, I don't think we would have seen Duke here, which did raise a few questions, but something that Kanan didn't want to talk about and brushed aside. Now as they enter the club, something else I don't think we should overlook is this interaction between Ronnie and Duke. Duke knows who Ronnie is and she was also aware of the players that were at this party, which was very reminiscent to her knowing the players in season 1. Duke is very street savvy, and again, I do think this interaction between Duke and Ronnie as they were leaving the club is a seed planter. Duke will tell Rock what Kanan's up to and who the players are, but if Ronnie fucks with Duke at some point in the future, then oh shit, we are going to see Marvin turn. Marvin's someone who has definitely been calm so far, where we've seen him really try hard to build this relationship and be a father to Duke, and if there was one thing that would definitely set him off, it would be if something happened to Duke. You know, let's not get it twisted, I think if anybody fucked with the Thomases then Marvin would definitely be there, but with Duke, Marvin really would take a no-holds-barred approach. But moving back to Kanan, this is where he was introduced to some of the players, including Snaps and Pop, where they not only said fuck Rock, they wanted Kanan to move up in the world and join the hustle with Ronnie. We also saw the writers bringing in some real-life experiences to the screen, a picture similar to that of Supreme Team, Fat Cat with the older heads, so this was definitely a nice touch. Now, we see Taylor two opposites, with Kanan getting deeper in the street game, being mentored by Ronnie, but with Rock having issues with hair business. The Salon suffered a burst pipe, which I don't think was a coincidence, but rather Officer Buckley and Roland continued to cause Rock issues, but this was the last straw. She knew she didn't know shit about being a landlord, like Lou said, and where we circle back to the theme of this breakdown, that's not who she is. So this is where she made a decision. Some were born to be doctors and lawyers, but she was here to move weight. It's what she does, it's who she is. With that being said, we saw Rock making a move to get back in the game. We saw her and Marvin going to visit Stefano where she said she wanted back in, and with an assist from the mailman, he accepted. But he did give Rock a stern warning. Now that she was back in the game, there was only one way out, which we know is death. Now, on a side note, Stefano also mentioned the same as Panessa and the same as Howard. They haven't found Unique's body yet, although from his intel at the police department, they're saying he's dead. Something else to bear in mind, taking over Unique's operation means they're going to be moving H, and that means they're going to be in direct competition with Ronnie and Kanan, so it is about to get spicy in the streets. Now, over to arguably the moment of episode 6, Lou's confession, which also comes back around to Kanan's narration. He was struggling with the actions of his past, and with him seeing yet another hallucination scene of Scrap, this was the moment where he decided he was going to do something very similar to Famous, getting it off his chest. But he wasn't confessing on the mic or to any random person, it was Scrappy's mom, and her eyes were full of revenge. You can guarantee she's gonna fuck shit up. She could either go to law enforcement and snitch, or she could even take matters into her own hands. Either way, Chantal will be making a move. But on Lou, I really do fear for him because not only has he confessed something he shouldn't have, when Rock finds out, she really is going to lose her shit. But let's not forget, there is also one more kill he needs to get off his chest, D-Wiz, and is that when it could be game over for Lou?